Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm joined by an author today. He's going to share a little bit about his journey and about the story that he's telling in the book that not only highlights the sports world when it comes to kids and sports, but also I guess, the combination of our parenting roles as our kids are playing sports, and then also, how do kids adapt to those, places that they go when they're in the sports competition. But Harvey Araton has joined me, and Harvey, thank you very much for being on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's just talk a little bit at first about you, kind of your background, and then obviously I want to lead into not only your family, but also the book as well.
I've been a long time sports journalist in the New York City area. Worked for four newspapers, um, the last of which was the New York Times, where I was a general sports columnist and feature writer for 25 years. I still contribute to the newspaper, but a few years ago I stepped away to just get off the road, log too many miles. And it's nice waking up in my own bed most mornings these days. But I covered all kinds of sports, traveled around the world, covered 10 or 11 Olympics, lots of tennis, Wimbledon, the French Open, um, ran the gamut, covering, from the 80s, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, a lot of NBA, a lot of baseball, 90s Yankees with Derek Jeter and Mariano Rivera and all those guys. So, on the one hand, I've spent a lot of time chronicling the exploits of the world's greatest athletes. And on the other hand, um, I just wrote a book about youth sports and trying to, offer some perspective on, the growing number of parents who think their child is going to be the next Magic Johnson or Roger Federer. And in a world where youth sports has become a $40 billion industry in the United States, um, that's presenting a lot of issues and challenges for families, and then that gets passed down to their young athletes.
Yeah. I think back to, my boys are, they're both in their 20s. And I think back to when they were growing up as they were, young kids. I coached all of their teams from the ages of 4 all the way up through high school. And they did a lot of baseball, a lot of mainly basketball. My younger son actually got a college scholarship to play college basketball for a Christian school here in Southern California. And through the years, I devoted a lot of time to coaching, and also I mainly did it because I wanted to be around my boys as much as possible. But I devoted a lot of time to coaching, and I witnessed a lot of parents, like you said, they think their kid's the next pro athlete, and I saw a lot of parents going from practices to practices, games to games, every single week, every single weekend. It was constant. And that was one thing that I didn't want to push on my boys. I always wanted them to want to do it. And I saw firsthand, I saw a lot of kids as they started to hit those early teenage years, they began to get burned out.
Mhm.
And parents continuing to push them and continuing to push them. And kids who were very, very, very talented by the time before, I'm saying even before they hit the high school age, uh, didn't want to play anymore, wanted to just stop playing.
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, it's fine. I was going to say that I and I know it's part of the reason is it's just the amount of time that they were devoting to it and the parents pushing them and pushing them. Kids just got burned out. These kids just got burned out.
Yeah, I think the latest statistic that I read about the number of boys and girls who begin some kind of youth sport when they are, the ages of somewhere between 5 and 7, by the time they are young adolescents, between 60 and 70% of them have basically stopped playing. Now, some of that obviously would be to just, losing interest. Perhaps they don't feel they're particularly adept at it. But I would agree with you that a lot of it is parent driven. And like you, I've raised two boys, both of whom played sports through high school and one into college. And I think I understand, from a psychological point, having been on the sidelines, done some coaching with my kids, that how seductive it is for parents. You work a long week, and the game on the weekend, whether it's whatever sport it is, um, lends a lot of excitement into your everyday life of routines. And then there's the social element to it for parents. Through the years, if they go through, the same group of kids and families from one team, one grade level to the next, they make new friends, and it becomes very much a social experience for parents they look forward to. And when their child may not show the level of interest to maybe to, progress with a certain group of kids from, you know, town rec league level to travel team or to select team, the parents may feel disappointed. They don't want to lose that, not only the little jolt of adrenaline they get on the weekend, but also that little social club that's been created through the years. So whether they realize it or not, they exert a lot of pressure on their kids to devote all this time and energy. And I think also, again, in this world where we now have, some of the richest people in the country. I was just reading the other day about Josh Harris and David Blitzer, who are co-owners of the Philadelphia 76ers. I also believe they own a National Hockey League team. Um, they started a company called Unrivaled, and their goal is to create the most, respected youth sports company in the country. And that means, buying up venues and, creating all kinds of national tournaments. We've come a long way. I mean, I'm old enough to have grown up in a time when youth sports was predominantly parent volunteers. We've
Hmm.
come a long way from that. And the people who are the kind of people investing serious money in the youth sports industry are not necessarily doing it, for the emotional and physical well-being of children. And I kind of compare it a little bit to our healthcare industry in this country, which many people believe um, is more for the benefit of the health insurance companies to make huge profits than it is to keep the majority of Americans healthy. Now we can ask the question of youth sports: is it for the kids' well-being and for a positive experience, or is it for profit that not only exerts a lot of pressure on families and children, but also creates an industry where many average families are just priced out? That's really not a place I think we want to go. I think to a certain extent, the horse is out of the barn. So the next question becomes, how do we best control it? How do we maintain it so that it doesn't get, a little too much, creating too much pressure for children, and also exploit a lot of families who get themselves involved thinking that they're making an investment in their child's future, but have to be reminded that their childs are not, they're not the stock market, they're not an investment, they're little human beings.
Yeah. Uh, I think back to again when my boys were younger. One of the rules, or I'd say rules, but one of the rules that my wife and I had for our boys when they were growing up was that, hey, we want you to obviously they're going to be going to school. We want you to be involved in some sort of extracurricular activity outside of the classroom, not sitting at home in front of the TV, something outside where you're doing something else. It didn't have to be sports. It could have been something else. My boys just gravitated towards sports. But one rule that we did have for them was that when you're playing a sport, if it's a game that you don't like or you're not interested in, that you're going to finish the season. You're not going to quit in the middle of the season because you're letting your team down. You're going to finish the season and then we'll pick something else. But you're also not going to play two sports at once. I see a lot of that happening too, or I witnessed a lot of that happening as I was coaching. Like kids would show up to practice late because they're coming from another team that they were playing on or another sport they were playing in, or kids would have to leave right after the game because they're heading to a different sport that they're playing. Do you think that that is part of the problem with youth sports today? Is there's so much activity that these kids are involved in that it really can create our kids to get to this place of burnout?
Yeah, I think it's both sides of the coin on this. I think that in a certain to a certain extent, there are many kids who are too overbooked,
Mm,
and it's not sometimes it's not just other sports; it's different teams within the
mm,
same sport.
right.
Um, Also, I think we are, though, and I think a lot of these for-profit businesses are trying to convince the families that, this is the age of specialization, and if you want to get ahead in a particular sport, you need to play it year round and not play another sport. I don't
Hmm.
see anything wrong with, let's say, for instance, a high school kid um, who plays football in the fall and lacrosse in the spring,
Right.
or whatever combination of sports allows them to play on a seasonal basis. But I do agree with you that you have kids coming and going, and it's it just overloads them
Hmm.
and does ultimately push them in the direction of burnout. My younger son. Um, was very young for his grade. So when he was in ninth grade, and he was on the freshman soccer team at our high school, also qualified to play for a select travel team that was an eighth grade team. And I just remember one time we had a little bit of a family rule that we didn't that my wife and I didn't go to the road games. And he played a game, his high school team played a game about an hour from where we live. And it was only the freshmen playing, so the JV and the varsities were not playing. And so they sent a couple of kids who were more advanced, who had been on the JV or the varsity, with the freshman team. And my son, because a couple of the kids who came down were played the same position, so he got knocked to the bench. And I remember, I was watching from a distance, and he was standing by the coach. And at some point in the second half, it became apparent to him that he wasn't going to get in the game. And when he came home, I asked him, I pretended I wasn't there, and I asked him how the game went, and he just burst into tears.
Hmm.
And, he said to me, uh, "This is too much soccer. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I feel so much pressure, to play on this team that's traveling all over the state. It was the select travel team, and then the high school team, and it just took this one bad day to trigger all these negative feelings." And so I sat him down and I said, "Which team is more important to you to play on, so you're not running from one practice to another?" And he said, "I want to stay on the high school team. Those are my closest friends in my grade." I said, "Done. We resigned. We quit the select team tomorrow." And that's what happened. So, there's a case where, I experienced that firsthand. Um, I think parents, and let me just add that I have nothing against, high-end competition and a place for the truly gifted and talented kids to compete against one another and to prepare them for the possible college scholarship or beyond that, Olympian, professional. Um, I think the reason why, but the reason why I wrote a middle grade reader's novel, which is the ages of 8 to 12, give or take, depending on the reader, is because those are the ages where children are still developing at the most fundamental, in the most fundamental way. Their bodies are nowhere near, fully developed. The kid who's the best player on the 8-year-old team may be the most average player on the 12-year-old team. And yet these sales pitches that these companies are now, making to parents is if you don't do it from the very beginning, if you don't get your kid into these, most sophisticated academies and, get the private coaching and the clinics and the whole 9 yards, they'll never catch up. And that is just a sales pitch. There's plenty of time to get to know your child, to get to the sense of what it is they truly want from competitive sports. And I believe that left to the child, if parents listen to the child and see what they want, the children will self-govern. They'll let you know how much they love it or how much they just want to do it for the experience of being out there on a nice fall afternoon kicking soccer balls around and being with their friends. There's no right or wrong, but I think when too much of this stuff about college scholarships and potential professional, athletes, um, if too much of that community noise um, is directed at kids at too young an age, to me, that's the danger of burning them out much more than anything else. There may be those exceptions to the rule, the kid who's 8 years old, who's a dynamo from the very beginning and is going to grow up and tell that story of how they knew they wanted to be a professional athlete from the time they were 6 or 7. It all sounds good, but the overwhelming majority of children have no way of knowing what they want out of sports at those early ages.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting when I was growing up and playing sports, I don't remember the teams that I played on or the sport that I played in. I don't remember them being year round. And it seems as time has progressed, and even when my kids started to get a little older, the particular sport ended up being a year round team that you played on. Like you'd go through the actual season, but then you'd have these off-season tournaments and these off-season scrimmages and these off-season practices. And even at the high school level, when I coached at the high school level, I was the associate head coach, and then there was the head coach. We had our regular season, basketball time, but then in the off season, we had spring ball that we were playing in different tournaments, and we had summer ball. We took a month off for CIF rules. We had to take a month off, but then after that, it was then we had fall ball, and it just continued and continued. I mean, there were times where we were playing close to 50 games in a year. And I mean, that's a lot on these kids. But it's interesting how it's just progressed, but I want to dive into about your book, The Goal of the Game. What's the premise behind it? What was the purpose behind you writing it, and what do you hope readers get out of it?
Well, when I was still writing my column at the Times, I'd say a little bit after the turn of the century, there were a couple of stories that caught my interest, and they pertain to youth sports. So I started writing and exploring some of these issues. I remember one column where I, realized that when I was a kid growing up, Little League Baseball, the Little League World Series, the championship game was always on ABC's Wide World of Sports, which was sort of a novelty one day a year. It was nice for the kids. And then, I woke up one day and realized like every game from the Little League World Series is on ESPN. And so I called up the Little League people and I said, um, I'm not I'm not accusing you guys of anything, but I'm just raising the question. Are we celebrating children or are we exploiting them by making them part of the for-profit universe of, Network America? And and so after that, I started, looking at the issues in youth sports. Um, but, I realized at some point about 3 years ago that all those stories that I had written were kind of directed at parents. And so I thought it would kind of be cool if I could somehow put um, myself into the mind of a 12-year-old or 11 or 12-year-old. Although my wife says I often act like a 12-year-old. Um, but if I could do that and write a story that would be directed just directed at children in that age range where I do believe, as I mentioned earlier, they are most vulnerable to these sales pitches. And so I put together a story about a young soccer player who wakes up on the day of his first game, um, U13 fall game and fall league game. And his team has gone from being pretty hopeless when they were 5 and 6 years old, and they've climbed the ladder, and now they are a nationally ranked team. And yes, there are national rankings for 12-year-old soccer teams and other sports as well. And he doesn't want to play anymore because he's had some trauma in his family life. And at a time when he needs to be surrounded by his close friends and supported by the kids who know him best, he looks around and the only kids he's playing with now are strangers because the team has grown to the point where it's a regional team and they come from towns all around. So he has to break the news to his mother, who is the parent manager and the driving force of this climbing the ladder. And he has to tell her that he's not going to play anymore. And that ends that's how the first chapter ends. Then the book goes back in time to when he was a young child just starting out with his dad teaching him the game. Takes you through the years of all the pleasures and perils of youth sports. A lot of the things we see that are very good but not so good happen on these fields of play, and then takes us back to the point again where he has quit, and that sets up the conclusion, the final 2 or 3 chapters, which I worked really hard on because, and I won't give away the ending, but I worked really hard on the ending of this book because I wanted kids, again, of this age range, no matter what sport they play and no matter what level they play that sport, whether it's town rec league, travel, select, super select, I wanted them to come away feeling good about why kids play sports in the first place. And it's my contention that at those early ages, if they are playing with some notion of a college scholarship or being a professional athlete, if they're not playing for the fundamental purity of, I love playing this sport, I love being on a team, I want to be a good teammate, I want to get to learn and play with kids from all different backgrounds, I like being outside, I like being in the gym, all of that, I like the snacks, everything that goes with it. If you're not playing at the age of 8, 9, 10 years old for those reasons, then you're playing for the wrong reasons. So I worked really hard on the ending so that when the kids put this book down, they'll smile and feel and be in touch with those best reasons for young kids to play a sport.
Hmm. What do you hope parents realize about their role after reading this book?
Well, again, again, and not to sound like, when I was young, but I don't remember my parents being around the fields much. I played
Right.
baseball, I played some basketball in high school. I don't remember them coming to more than a few games. They would have like designated parents' nights, and that's what I remember them. But I remember most of the time when I played organized sports, it was just us, other students in the stands, things like that. Um, Although my fondest memories of playing sports growing up when it was just us kids in the schoolyard, playing, softball or basketball down on the playground. Um, but I realize this is a completely different era, and parents are heavily involved with their kids. They're financing it also, of course they're going to be. But my message to parents would simply be, I wouldn't advise them not to be involved and to let their kids go off on their own, because again, that's not the era we're living in. But I guess my best advice would be, um, listen to your kids, observe them, support them, make these opportunities available, but always listen to them and what they're telling you, whether it's with their body language or actual words. One of the earliest parental experiences was with my older son. He had played first grade town league soccer, and he was pretty good for, whatever, at that age. Some of the kids are just sitting on the grass and pulling blades out of it, but he could dribble and he was left footed, which was a little different. Um, but after that first year, two or three of his friends on his team were trying out for the travel league, for the travel program in our town. And I remember saying to him, "Hey, Nick's trying out, Jake's trying out. You want to try out?" And he said, "No, not really." And I remember, being a competitive guy and again, a sports journalist who covered all these great athletes. So maybe I did harbor a little bit of this fantasy that my kid grew up to be the next Lionel Messi or something. And I remember feeling a little deflated and disappointed that he said no. So over the next couple of weeks, I must have found five or six different ways to rephrase the question, you know. And each time he would say to me, "No, not really." But then after the last time I asked him, he said to me, "Dad, if I don't play travel, is it okay if I still play town league?" And I remember feeling this little bit of shame that here he was saying, "This is what it means to me right now. I just want to play, I just want to learn the game. I want to be with some kids outside." And I was projecting my values, my ambitions onto him. Now, eventually, 2 or 3 years later, he came to me and said, "I want to try out for travel." And he did, and he wound up playing travel soccer and he flirted a little bit with the select program. But it always made me mindful of hearing them and
Mhm.
not getting carried away with our own ambitions. And it's understandable. Sports, the one thing about sports, and I always say this, if you have a child who's a brilliant mathematician, right? Chances are the only people who are going to know about it are the boys and girls in his or her class, right? It's not something that we celebrate overtly in our communities, you know, but sports is out there. I mean, the kids are out there every weekend. All your all the other kids on the team's parents are, "Wow, your kid is good." I mean, that was an unbelievable goal. That kind of stuff. And and so it's a human thing to swell with pride when your child is out on that field, which is really a stage, and they're performing like that. Maybe kids who are child actors or musicians get that kind of attention, but sports, I remember our local town newspaper, when it used to be a printed paper every week, now it's just online, um, used to devote several pages a week to what was going on in the community with sports, not just the high school teams, but the 12-year-old football team and the kids who were playing on the Y travel basketball teams. They all got their names in the paper. There was occasional photo. And so, the people in the community knew of the kids who were the high risers by the time they got to high school. You don't get that. So I understand why the parents' nature is to, want that so much for their kids. I mean, sports is so huge in this country. Look, college football is,
Mhm.
it's an amazing thing. 100,000 people in how many stadiums around the country every Saturday in the fall. So I get that, but you really have to stop and and temper this passion and be realistic about who your child is and what they're telling you. And if by the time they're 11 or 12, they have this, you can see that they are driven and, they're the ones at the door yelling for you to come down because they'll be late for practice, as
Right.
opposed to you yelling upstairs for your kid to get down or he'll be late to practice. If they're the ones driving the bus, it's all good.
Yeah, I agree with that. As you were talking, I was thinking about one of the examples in my head that I remember with my boys. You know, they loved baseball. My boys loved playing baseball as they were growing up, and my older son he was playing baseball, and then he started to play for a basketball team, and we finished up practice one day and I could tell there was something bothering him. And we got in the car and I said, "Hey, what's going on? I can tell something's on your mind." And he said, "Dad, I need to talk to you about something." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "But I don't want you to be mad." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Well, I need to tell you something, and I think you're going to get upset about it." And I said, "Well, no, I won't get upset. Tell me what's going on." He said, "Well," he goes, "I know you guys like me playing baseball, and you guys come out and have a good time and all that kind of stuff, and I don't want to play baseball anymore." He's like, I don't like it. I did it, when he was at the time he was 10, but when he's like, I did it when I was younger. He goes, I don't like it anymore. And I really don't want to play. And I said, "Oh," I said, "Okay. Everything on the team is okay. Like nothing." He's like, "No, no, no. It's just, I just don't like playing anymore. It's boring to me. It's like there's not a whole lot of action going on. I'm like bored." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. You don't have to play." And he's like, "Wait, you, you're not mad?" And I said, "No, I'm not mad. Why would I be mad?" He's like, "No, because I know you and mom really like the sport and all that." And I said, "No, no, no, I'm not mad that you don't want to play." I said, "However, we are in the middle of the season and you do have to finish the season. I mean, you can't just walk out on your team." And he's like, "No, no, no, I'll finish the season." And I said, "Well, you finish the season." I said, "And you know our rule, you got to do something. So what is it that you want to play or do?" And he said, "I just want to play basketball. That's what I want to do." And I said, "Done. We'll finish this season. We'll move on to basketball." And he's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah, you don't have to." And I don't think to this day, I don't think he's ever picked up a bat since then. Like, I can't remember him ever picking up a bat. It's just a sport that he just was not interested in. And he played basketball the rest of his, into junior high and high school. He played basketball and loved it and thrived at it. So you're right. My point is, you're right. You have to listen to your kids. They will tell you if you're open to listening and not being critical or harsh, you're opening to listening and hearing your kids, they will tell you how they're feeling. It doesn't matter if it's
And
sport, it could be anything.
yeah, and your son was basically demonstrating how perceptive, you know, kids can be, that he was aware of your of his parents' level of enjoyment from going to the games. What I
Hmm.
was talking about earlier, how it becomes something for us to look forward to. And so often, and then you mix in today's world also where parents are laying out, you know, fairly substantial sums of money. And again, um, the perceptiveness of kids, whatever age, whether they're 9, 11, 13, uh, they know. They know that mom and dad are signing these checks. They may not know exactly the exact amount and how that factors into the family budget, but they know that money is being spent on them and that time is being invested, and also that their parents, you know, like it. They like the whole social camaraderie and stuff of being part of the team.
Hmm.
And, it for many kids, it might be they may not have the same faith that your son had in you, that you would, not react in a bad way or try to, pressure him to staying on. Many kids might think, I don't want to upset mom or dad because they do like it. I mean, the character in my book is, the book starts with him up in bed, dreading going down and telling his mom, who's so invested in the management of this team and the growth of it. So, yeah, I mean, I think people have to also realize that kids get so much more than the potential college scholarship out of playing sports. I like to say that youth sports, particularly at again these young ages, is more of a, or should be more, of a path to developing life skills more than a bridge to a college scholarship. If that becomes something that seems like it's possible a little later on, go for it. But in those early years, I always also tell the story of my younger son who was 4 foot 10 or 11 when he went to high school. And we live in a town that has a pretty big high school, 2,000 kids. And um, and and he had played on a Y basketball team, but he was so small, but the kids knew him. So when it came to trying out for the freshman basketball team, they would let him set up the offense and things like that, right? They knew they'd get the ball back because he wasn't beating anybody off the dribble and jumping over anyone. And because of that, and actually the guy who was trying the kids out had played for the Knicks, um, a bunch of years ago, a guy named Rory Sparrow. And he grew up in our area. And they took him on the team, and he wound up playing 4 years of high school basketball. Now he hit puberty late, so we're not big people, so he grew to be like 5'9.5" or whatever. But at this tiny size, he's playing high school basketball, and they're going into cities like Newark and Jersey City against some of these real urban players who are quite good. And he was, he played all 4 years. He had his varsity year. He was a point guard. But my point is that in those years when he was the smallest kid in his grade, I mean, boy or girl, um, being on the basketball team, being a small kid, a very small kid, playing a big kid sport, did so much for his self-esteem. And I really saw that over those years, he actually was a very good musician. He played the saxophone. And once he made the basketball team in the high school, he didn't want to pick it up. All he wanted to do was be in the gym. And I remember saying to my wife, he's not going to be a basketball player, but he could be a musician. But I didn't factor in the self-esteem that he was getting by being able to play on a high school basketball team. He still plays to this day. He played a little in college. He plays in men's leagues now in New York. And it did so much for him just being on the team, just making it. And so it doesn't have to be the pursuit of a college scholarship. It can just be, again, developing those good feelings about yourself and the life skills that you carry into whatever you do, as a profession, being part of a team, working with other people. Those are all the benefits of being a youth sport athlete. And I wholeheartedly endorse it, but for the right reasons.
Yeah. The social aspect behind it is huge as well, for them interacting with not only other kids, but learning how to interact appropriately with coaches and all those kinds of things is super important. Um, I want to ask you, as far as the book goes, how can my listeners or viewers look it up or pick it up to read it? Where can they do all those things?
Well, the book is available right now on Amazon. The goal of the game, my last name. You just Google my name and the goal of the game. The Amazon page will come up. I also have a website, harveyaraton.com, that has a little bit more about the book. I've done some blogs writing about these youth sports issues, and there's more of a synopsis of the book online on my website. Although you can find the same thing on the Amazon page. So it's Barnes and Noble, Amazon, pretty much the best way is to order online, I would say.
All right, cool. Well, listen, Harvey, I appreciate you being on and sharing a little bit about not only your journey, but also about the story, the premise behind the book and the purpose behind it. And I do hope that that parents that are watching or listening go out and pick it up. But thank you very much for being on, my friend.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's always nice to talk to somebody who's knowledgeable about these issues and also has raised two sons.
Yeah.
You know what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, for those of you that are watching, listening, please go check out his website. Go pick up the book, learn a little bit more about it. Maybe it'll help you, maybe it'll help your kids, but it'll definitely help the family unit grow stronger when you read it. So please make sure you do that. You can get that book. You can check out his website and all the links below in the show notes. So make sure you do that. And listen, if you are not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at daduppodcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad Up.